All right, folks, this is COM 261's recording of the Wednesday and Friday lectures for the first week of class here in spring 2022. And this lecture is on audio storytelling. I call it Audio Storytelling 101. So first off, I find that audio is the most intimate form of storytelling. And I say this because in audio storytelling, you're speaking directly to one person, really just one. What am I talking about? Well, think about this. When you listen, you're listening all alone. It's all you. That's what makes audio intimate. It's you and the producer. It's a one-on-one exchange between the storyteller and the listener. Remember the communication goals of audio storytelling, and all forms of communication are to inform, persuade, or entertain. When you're communicating with people in a professional setting, you're doing one of these three things. You're informing them, you are persuading them, or you are entertaining them. So here during this asynchronous online on-demand lecture, I'm going to ask you to do a few exercises. And right now, I'd like to ask you to do our very first exercise. And seriously, actually do these. It might feel a little hokey to pause the video when you could just blow through it, but then what are you really learning? Have fun with these exercises. Here's how they work. Go into Canvas, into week one, and find the form called week one worksheets. Take a minute and do that right now. Go ahead and pause this video. So throughout this lecture, we'll have several times I'd like you to actually pause the video, think and make some lists or write down other information. This is going to be one of those times. So take 3 to 5 minutes to write down a list of stories that could, number one, inform people, number two, persuade people, or number three, entertain an audience. Write down as many examples for each one as you'd like, but take 3 to 5 minutes. For example, a story that informs an audience could be about new airplane or helicopter technology, or the latest in music news, or a weekly sports report. A story that persuades could be one that tries to get you to vote for a political candidate, or maybe change the way you eat and exercise, or something that encourages you to reuse things and recycle more. And finally, a story that entertains people could be about an epic snowboarding adventure. Maybe it's a story of love and loss in the desert, or even a quest to find the center of the universe. I think you get the gist. Informing, persuading, and entertaining. Make lists. So right now, pause this video, find the worksheets in Canvas, and make your lists. This is a question on the week one worksheet. I'll give you some time to pause it right now. Okay, let's talk about audio storytelling. First of all, you should know that audio storytelling is a whole production. It's not two people sitting around in a garage speaking into the same microphone. At first, we all think audio storytelling is easy. And when we engage in it, we realize it's so much more than just talking. It's about crafting the proper communication and targeting it to a specific audience. It's about editing. It's about having a special touch that brings your story, your production, and your audience together. There's a process for everything in audio production. It's not as simple as flipping on the mics and getting started. There's a technical aspect to each element of the audio, and audio production really can't be treated as something you would do right before the deadline, because it takes serious time and attention. So how do we tell stories, specifically audio stories? You could fill in the blanks on the screen and you would find the word narrative arc. We tell stories using a narrative arc. My next question for you is, what is a narrative arc? And we'll get into that right now. So there are two ways of looking at a narrative arc. In this graphic, we see this word on the bottom left, exposition, preceding something called an inciting incident. Coming up next is what you call rising action, which leads to a climax. A falling action leads to a resolution, and denouement, which is another way of saying wrapping it all up. So things to consider. Where does this story begin? Where does it end? What is the minimum amount of information the listener, or if it's a video, the viewer, or if it's a book, the reader, needs to know to jump in and understand the story? We call this exposition. Exposition is the minimal amount of information someone needs to know to jump in and understand a story at a specific starting point. In your story, what are you trying to reveal? What are you trying to educate people about? What are you trying to entertain? What are you trying to inform? And what are you trying to persuade? Who are the characters? How do you wrap up the story at the end? In the previous graphic, we saw the resolution leading to something called denouement, D-E-N-O-U-E-M-E-N-T. Denouement is wrapping up a story at the end and tying up all the loose ends. So the listener or viewer or reader can walk away from the story and feel like they understood everything. Here's another way of looking at a narrative arc. This one comes without the words exposition and denouement, but you can find them in the setup and the resolution. This thing called the inciting incident was found on both graphics. This is the spark that starts the story. The event that leads to the rising action and ultimately the climax. It's how we get going. It's the start. Let's talk about preparation for your podcast. So what you're not going to do is you are not going to produce a sit around your garage or living room or dorm room and record a random set of thoughts with a friend type of story. People do that, yes. You've got Joe Rogan and that group of people, but even those folks have extensive experience in audio storytelling. Notice that I didn't say they have extensive training, but they have extensive experience in audio storytelling, and they know how to captivate an audience. So they may have gotten to the point where they can sit around their studio with a guest, but they didn't start there. So you need to understand your story better than your listener understands it. If you're interviewing people, do your research, lots of it, so you are well informed. When you interview an expert, you will be able to lead them down the path of the story you want to tell. If you're interviewing someone, you don't have to know it all, but you have to know enough to get them to where you want to take the audience. If it's a narrative story, your story has to be well written and written in a voice that people can understand. Throughout the semester, we'll talk more about writing for the ear, because we read, watch, and hear things completely differently. And this all falls under preparation and being prepared to produce your podcast. Okay, let's switch gears to the topic of quality control. When we speak about quality, we're talking about both the technical production side of things, which involves using microphones and editing software. And then we also talk about quality in terms of storytelling and how you tell the story you're trying to do. A great way to become familiar with quality of storytelling is just to gobble this stuff up. Consume massive amounts of audio storytelling and podcasting throughout this course. I strongly encourage you on your own, in your free time, to put in your earbuds or your headphones or put on your smart speaker and listen to podcasts, news, other audio stories. Just gobble it up. Over time, you're going to find problems and faults and things that drive you bonkers, nuts, or insane about the way some people produce their podcasts. Whether it's a theme song, a way the host carries themselves, their pacing, the unbalanced audio levels they come up with. Maybe one of the hosts has a lip smack between every sentence. You'll notice these things and they'll drive you nuts, and you'll learn from their mistakes about the mistakes you don't want to make. Also, in terms of quality, we've got the hardware and our locations. So we will be using professional grade microphones. We have access to studios, and we have other tools and environments that will help you create high quality audio products. So with that said, let's get into our second exercise. This is question 2 on the week 1 worksheet in Canvas. So the question I'd like you to ponder and then answer is this: what drives you crazy or nuts or insane about audio storytelling and podcasts that you've listened to in the past? What's made you turn them off? What makes you cringe? Is it a particular tone of the host's voice? Is it unbalanced or uneven audio, where one character is extremely loud and the other is too soft to hear, where they're almost inaudible? Is it a theme song that you just can't stand? Make a list. You don't have to write a specific show name if you don't recall. Just think about your pet peeves you encounter when listening to podcasts, or even pet peeves you could encounter when listening to podcasts. I'm going to give you time to pause. So pause the video and complete question 2 in the week 1 worksheet on Canvas. Again, this is question 2. Pause the video now and go for it. Our next topic is editing. What's the goal of editing? Once again, I'm going to ask you to get into the week 1 worksheet in Canvas. This is question number 3. What is the goal of editing? Now actually do this exercise. Do all of these exercises. They will only benefit you. Pause the video and make a list of reasons about why you think we edit. Why do we edit? Is it for quality control? What does that mean? To balance audio? What does that mean? What are we doing when we're editing? Make a list and keep it on the worksheet. I'll take a break right now so you have time to pause the video. This is question 3 in the week 1 worksheet. Why we edit. So there's this famous editor. His name is Walter Murch. He's a film editor, and he's got this great quote that I'd like to share with you. It is, "You can explain the roots of dance, but to explain how to dance, you just have to dance." Apply this logic to editing At some point, you just have to jump in and start editing. There's no master class, no class at Western Colorado University, no class at NYU Film that will prepare you like just doing it. It's one of those things that you don't fully understand until you just dig in and start to figure it out and start to do it. And of course, we're going to talk about how to edit in this class, but to learn to edit, you have to edit. So let's talk a little more about editing. It is a series of choices intended to attract and not distract your listener. So you want to ATTRACT and not DISTRACT your listener. The choices you make will be up to you as an editor. It's good to have someone around to give you feedback because we oftentimes get lost in our own choices. The longer you spend editing a piece, the more you're hooked on it, hitched to it, married to it. And sometimes it's hard to let go. And another person, whether they're a senior editor or for this class, maybe just a peer, can help give you a perspective you otherwise didn't have. Okay, we're going to jump into the topic of interviews right now. And before we talk about interviews, I'd like you to perform another exercise. Let's just say you're interviewing an Olympic softball player, one of the best softball players in the world. They play for America and they're heading off to the Summer Olympics to play softball. What are some basic interview questions you would ask them? Take 5 minutes. Come up with 4 to 6 questions. Think about the beginning, the middle, and the end of the interview. Think like a story. Think about a narrative arc. I'll pause the video. I'll pause for a moment so you can pause the video. But think about what you would ask an Olympic softball player in an interview. Write down 4 to 6 questions. Okay, let's do this again, but with a different guest. So this time you're interviewing a scientist who discovered a new planet. What are some basic interview questions you would ask a scientist who discovered a new planet? Take 5 minutes. Again, come up with 6 questions. Think about the narrative arc. What's the beginning, middle, and end? Go for it. I'll pause for a moment so you can pause. You're interviewing an astronomer who discovered a new planet. What are you going to ask him? Go for it. All right, we're moving along in the Audio Storytelling 101 lecture. We're talking about interviews. So there are some things that an interview is not. It's not a question and answer, meaning you ask one question, they give you one answer, and you move on to your next question. Interviewing is not an interrogation. They're not under arrest. They didn't do anything wrong. They have some information that you as a storyteller would like to share with the world. And interviewing is definitely not a job interview. It's not dull, boring, or dry. It's your job to make interviewing fun for both the guest and the audience. So let's talk about what interviewing is. Interviewing is, it's like a dance with 2 people moving together. It's a conversation that people are having. And in conversations, we're not interrogating them and we're not treating them as if they're trying to get a job. We're talking with them like real people. And interviewing is a discovery. You're finding out something you didn't know before the interview, either you or your audience. In interviews, don't be afraid to ask a follow-up question or many follow-up questions when someone says something interesting and you think there's more to the story. For example, could you tell me more about that, please? Or how did that start? How did you get interested in this field of study or this sport? No way. What happened next? That's a great question to ask when someone tells you about an exciting event, but just kind of stops. We know the audience wants to hear more. We know you as the interviewer want to hear more, but you have to ask in order for your interview subject to actually tell you. Why did it happen like that? How did it happen? These are all great follow-up questions that you will learn to ask as you do more and more interviewing throughout the years and throughout this semester, as a matter of fact. All right, our next consideration with audio storytelling is our location. So as you use high-end microphones like we have here in the department, you should know that your microphone will pick up all sounds. If you can hear it, your microphone can hear it. Do you want your microphone to pick up all of the sounds you're hearing? Maybe, but probably not. In your location, you're going to want to listen for things like echoes, reverb, appliances like air conditioners, heaters, clocks, refrigerators, buzzing shop lights, stuff like that. Anything that's making a sound. Stop before the interview, ask for dead silence, and try to find something that's making a sound. We're so integrated to hearing refrigerators buzzing and clocks ticking that you don't realize that your microphone might be picking it up. You probably don't want a lot of this stuff in your recording, unless you're maybe trying to sound like you're in a location. For example, you're in a woodworking shop. Occasionally, you're going to want to hear sounds of woodworking. Maybe. Whether you want this in the recording depends on the recording. As someone is woodworking and talking about their woodworking, do you want the sound of the saw hitting the wood? Maybe for a moment. If you're interviewing someone in a woodworking shop and their coworker is 20 feet away from you running a grinder and you can barely hear the interview, do you want that? Probably not. So remember, if the audio is low quality, which is a fancy way of saying the audio sucks. So if the audio sucks, people won't listen. There's a fine line between creating a scene, and we'll learn more about scenes in the book, and capturing and recording good, clean, usable audio. So you as the producer are going to be dancing a very fine line between creating a scene and capturing and recording good, clean, usable audio. We will workshop with microphones and their specific patterns, which is how a microphone picks up sound, in a workshop or two this semester. So we will get into the nitty-gritty of the microphones we have available here in communications. All right, let's switch to the topic of timing. What's the appropriate length for a story? Think about this. You're probably not going to listen to an hour-long story about a dog on a walk. However, we might listen to an hour-long story about a dog that saves lives on the avalanche team at the ski area. Or you might listen to an hour-long story about a drug-sniffing dog at the US-Canada border. Or maybe the dog on a walk has a rare canine disease and is in experimental trials while veterinarians search for the cure. Or maybe the dog is being walked around a neighborhood that burnt down in the 1950s and lost many of its historic artifacts. Are those more interesting angles than just walking a dog? I think so. So when do we change topics? How do we keep a listener captivated? What's the appropriate length for the story? Are we working for an editor who is giving us a specific length our story must be cut to? Does it need to be exactly 29 minutes and 59 seconds? Does it need to be exactly 3 minutes? Does it need to be exactly 59 seconds? Think about this. What's the average listening time for podcasts? We'll talk about that more in the semester. If you're creating a podcast with multiple episodes, how many episodes is this worthy of? You know how some shows on Netflix and Hulu just drag on and on and on and on and on and on. They could have been wrapped up at the end of season 1 and the show could have been done. So don't be the person who just drags it on and on and on and on and on. You've been annoyed with it, so try not to annoy others with it. Find the appropriate length for your story. These are considerations that help us determine our appropriate length. Okay, our next topic is being descriptive. Remember that you are the storyteller. The way you describe the story is what the listener sees in their mind's eye. It's how they imagine it. So you are the eyes and the ears. You're the reporter. You're the author. You're the voice of God. You're omnipotent, omnipresent, and sentient. When people are listening to podcasts, they hear you. Here, how about this? You're Bob Ross, so paint the picture. Be specific and use your words to tell the story. This is our final exercise in the week 1 worksheet. It's the last question for the week. So let's think about the word walk. W-A-L-K. It's not that interesting or that descriptive. So let's make a list of words that could better describe how someone walks and explain what that might look like. Did they shuffle, scurry, saunter, or sprint? How about trot? Maybe they skipped. These all paint a much more vivid picture about what a character did as they went down the sidewalk. So if they shuffled, maybe they stood sideways and put one foot together and then spread their feet apart and shuffled down the sidewalk like a football player doing a drill. If they sauntered, they may be like an explorer in the woods with their head to the sky and walking very slowly. So let's be descriptive. Here in this exercise, take 3 minutes and do this. And then take another 3 minutes and use thesaurus.com. A thesaurus gives you synonyms, but don't start with thesaurus.com. Seriously, don't cheat. So take 3 minutes and write other words for walk and even try to describe them. And then go to thesaurus.com and find even more words for walk. You might find that you don't need to use the word walk in your story. Find something more descriptive. I'll slow down so you can pause the video. Okay, this brings me to my very last point. In audio storytelling and podcasting, there are no limits, meaning you can take this as far as you want and there's no one telling you to stop. You're not beholden to something called a clock, a broadcast clock, which is how radio historically has determined the length of the stories, because they have segments they're trying to fill. In podcasting, where you use an RSS feed to post it to Spotify, Apple or Amazon Music, Stitcher, or any of these other places, Stitcher, I'm sorry, or any of these other places, you don't have a limit into your length. And also don't forget that there is no perfection in audio storytelling and podcasting. As you listen to others, you are inevitably going to hear things you do not like. So just like Tiger Woods, is he perfect at golf? Is either Jimmy Page or Eric Clapton perfect on a guitar? Do these people make mistakes? Yes. Is there a perfect chess player in the world? That one might be a maybe. But remember, there's always room for improvement in nearly every aspect of life, and that includes podcasting. Remember, your voice is a very powerful tool. It can retell history, raise awareness, persuade, inform, and entertain people, and give insights into someone's life without any supporting visuals. Audio storytelling is powerful, it is intimate, it is one-on-one. So that's the Audio Storytelling 101 lecture. Remember, you should, if you haven't done so already, pick up the textbook titled Make Noise by Eric Newsom. Quiz 1 is due January 23 and is based totally on the book. There are 4 quizzes total on the Newsom book, and you may work ahead as much as you want. You can finish it right away if you're motivated to do so. And during this asynchronous period, I strongly encourage you to work ahead while the workload is a little bit lighter. We will crank things up when we go in person. The bookstore here at Western sells this book for the same price as Amazon, and I think they have 10 copies. So if you're one of the first 10 folks to get there, you can get it at the bookstore. Otherwise, order it on Amazon and do it ASAP. Also, I've put the first 2 chapters and the welcome chapter on Canvas. This is exactly what you need for quiz number 1. So if you're not able to get the book and Amazon has a delay, you can find a PDF of the chapters needed for quiz number 1 in the week 1 module on Canvas. Here's my disclaimer. I won't be posting any additional chapters from the book on Canvas, but you can get chapters 1 and 2 in the welcome chapter for the first quiz. Okay, that's it for the first week. On Friday, I'll make an announcement for class on Wednesday. Remember, we do not have class on Monday because it is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I've always thought of this as a day of service, so I encourage you to do something good for the world in the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr., even if it's as simple as walking around your dorm room or apartment building with a grocery bag and picking up garbage, or donating to something like the food pantry. Just do something good for the world on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. If you look at the syllabus, I might change the class lesson on Wednesday from Adobe Audition to something else that we can tackle more easily in remote fashion. So that syllabus is going to be a flexible document while we are in our remote period. And we're going to save software and file management for in-person learning because I would like to help you learn to push the buttons and navigate the software. Okay, that's it for the first week. Best of luck. Make sure to fill out the worksheets. They do count on your attendance and participation grade. It's largely a complete or incomplete, but get to thinking about audio storytelling here while we are working remotely. Thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you next week.